Hi, folks. Steve Urban here, founder and CEO at recruiting firm Riderflex. If you enjoyed today's guest interview, please give it a like and be sure to subscribe to the Riderflex podcast. And now, a quick word from our sponsor.
Try the #1 marketing platform for small business. Everything you need from design to marketing to CRM. Learn more at marketing360.com. Marketing 360. Fuel your brand.
All right. Payton Shubrick on the Riderflex podcast. Hi, Payton. How you doing?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
I am pronouncing your last name correctly, aren't I?
Shubrick, yes.
Shubrick. Shubrick. I liked it. I like it. By the way, Payton is on LinkedIn. She loves it when people connect with her on LinkedIn, so you can find her there. Shubrick.
I do.
Shubrick. Payton Shubrick. So are you in Springfield today in the store or whereabouts?
I am. I virtually live here at this point in time. We are officially on day 32 of being open to the general public.
You got a little like cot in the back, like a little bed in the back. You just kind of sleep back there for a couple hours, get up and keep going.
Yeah, I mean, I do have a sofa in my office, so that seems to be where I spend most days and nights on occasion. But yeah, love showing up here every day. I have a great team, but I haven't gotten out much lately.
Living the startup life, right?
Almost certainly. Living the dream, as they say.
Living the dream. LTD. That's what we used to call it for short. LTD. Before we get into the store, Six Bricks, and get into the company, let's talk about Payton early life. Mom, dad, siblings, where you grew up. Give us some history if you don't mind.
Oh, I don't at all. So, born and raised here in Springfield, Massachusetts, the oldest of four. Fun fact, my sisters and I all have unisex names, so Peyton Taylor Jordan. And then I have a brother, Frederick II, and really good home life. Can't complain. Mom and dad, Sunday dinners, and really grew up in a strong community environment. I stayed far out of trouble. So growing up here in the city of Springfield, it wasn't until I went to college that I was aware of how people viewed the city of Springfield, because to me it was always home, right? And then you go to college and freshman year, people are like, so how did you survive Springfield? I'm like, what are these people talking about, right? And then you come to the realization of how people view your hometown. But I always like to tell people it's one of the things you can't change about yourself, right? You can't pick your family and you can't pick where you were born. And so embracing it has been something I've always found myself doing. But yeah, no complaints. A pretty close-knit family, I would say.
Okay. And what'd your folks do?
So my father was in the trucking industry for quite some time as a truck driver for various entities like Stop and Shop and Hood. And my mother is an administrative assistant for what used to be Columbia Gas of Massachusetts, but is now Eversource.
Okay. Very good. And you said 4 siblings in total, right? Is that right?
4 including me, yes.
4 including you. Okay. And where are you?
I'm the oldest.
You're the oldest? Okay. All right. Did you have to do a lot of babysitting, a lot of mentoring?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I really embraced being the oldest. It could have been a combination of different family members prepping me for this role or just the natural leader in me. But I would say I took on the role of babysitting as my first attempts of hosting meetings, making folks do things that perhaps they didn't want to do. Like, we're going to play house today and we're going to dress up. And so really ensuring that I was able to learn how to influence when you really didn't have power and authority early on, which probably set me up for my career trajectory as we now think about it.
I mean, yeah, you're a natural leader, obviously. What kind of kid were you? In high school? Were you straight A student? Were you a little bit of a rebel? Like, where were you in there?
Yeah, so in high school, well, I guess going back to really elementary school, I was always an overachiever. So if I got a 98, I really wanted the 100. And so I could never be really satisfied with what I got because I knew I was missing something in there. So elementary school, Catholic school, learned a lot about Hail Marys and progressing into what was high school. I kept a lot of that intact. So
Yeah.
3 varsity sports, never really happy unless I had a first place finish, and wanting to get the best grades so I can get into the best schools. And so I can acknowledge now is probably my own worst critic relative to wanting to get it all done, even if I didn't have the time to do it. So I would be notorious for going to a soccer game, finishing it, and then running to a band concert because I was also in band. So the idea of missing out on something just didn't sit well with me. So I attempted to do it all. And that stayed pretty true throughout college as well, being in a multitude of different activities.
I see that. And by the way, I love the fact that on your LinkedIn profile that you actually have some of those collegiate activities on there. I wish more people would do that. It just shows early signs of leadership, organization, time management, and everything else it takes to do activities while you're in school, right? So I love the fact that you have that on there.
Thank
Love
you. I
it.
appreciate that. I mean, honestly speaking, I love the fact that as a part of my education, I did have access to sports. I think it really informed quick decision making, especially whether you're on the track or on the field, having to decide, but then also the dynamics of being on a team, right? I mean, in college, I ran track and field, but the reality of it is I still required a team to win the meet at the end of the day. So I can win my event, but it didn't mean much if my team was blown out. So I love connecting with folks that are current or former athletes, because there is something special about that camaraderie you build when you're working towards a common goal.
Oh, no doubt about it. As a recruiting firm and as a recruiter and somebody that's been hiring people for years and years and years, decades, if I see a candidate that played college athletics and worked and went to school all the way, I mean, you just know they are determined,
Yeah.
work ethic, grit. I mean, you could just go on and on and on, right? I mean, seriously. So you ran track at Holy Cross, College of the Holy Cross. Is that what is that? Division 2, Division 1, 3? What is that?
That's Division 1, so they are in the Patriot League. So
Wow.
we would compete against schools like Army and
Wow.
Navy and
Wow.
Bucknell. The running
Pretty,
joke in the family now is my sister recently graduated from Holy Cross as well. So she graduated in May. She was also on the women's track and field team, but she's a thrower and she was able to secure 2 school records to my one, but my one was on a relay. So she says I had a uniform where she competed, as a running joke. I like to think I did more than just wear the uniform, but to each his own.
that's pretty cool. Wow. So some athletes in the family. So was your mom or dad the athlete or both? Who was where did it come from? Where's the genes
Well,
come
it
from?
depends on which one you ask, right? Mom will claim that she had some athletic abilities in there, but I would say we take more so after our dad, who was big into basketball.
Was he? Okay. Very good. So you were fast, obviously. You were super fast.
I like to think so. I mean, going sub 60 and the 400 meters is nothing to be ashamed of.
Wow.
And, it definitely builds character.
Right. Pretty cool. Did you go on scholarship, by the way?
I
To
did.
run? Very nice. Oh, congratulations. I see political science in there as the major for your undergrad. What were you gonna do with that? Were you gonna teach? Were you gonna be going to politics? What was the plan there?
Yeah, so the plan at the time was law school. And if you talk to
Oh,
my dad now, he will still ask, when am I going? The reality is, after graduating in 2015, that was the plan. I was supposed to go to law school. My dad had paid for the LSAT course, the
ooh,
books, and the
ooh,
test.
ooh,
And then I just didn't take it, meaning the test.
man.
And so at that point, cannabis had definitely caught my eye. But the plan was for me to have a groundbreaking case and change the course of American history forever
I
as a
see.
lawyer. Just
Wow.
haven't gotten around to it yet.
Are there other attorneys in the family?
No, I was supposed to be
Okay.
the
Oh,
first. My
okay.
dad's a bit old school, but I can appreciate it. So, every family needs a lawyer, doctor, police officer. And so
Right, right.
I was supposed to
Yeah.
be the lawyer.
Your dad's probably my age. I'm 55. How old is he?
He's around the same age as that.
Around the same age. Yeah, that's about what I figured. He went to high school in the 80s, I'm sure. Probably, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, we
Both
got
of
to
Oh, go
Well,
ahead.
yeah, go ahead. What were we gonna say?
I was like, both of my parents, born in New York, Ossining, Westchester County,
Okay.
smaller town feel. But yeah, they had a lot of that old school upbringing, getting in before the street lights and just having a different view of, what a successful career path is. So it's definitely been a journey of getting them to where they are now working at a cannabis company.
So they both work for you.
Yes.
Wow. How about that? That is how about any of your siblings? Any other family members so far?
So of the six, that makes six bricks with the
Yeah.
play on the last name
Oh,
Shubrick.
oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. I see. That's why it's called six. Okay, got
Yeah,
it. All right.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, who else works there?
Yeah, so you have mom, dad, myself, and my sister Taylor. Jordan is now at Duke for graduate school, and Frederick's 13, so he has a while before he can legally participate.
Okay, Frederick's 13 now. That's okay. So 13, what is that? Freshman? What is that? I can't remember. What grade
Eighth
is it?
grade.
Eighth grade. So right, so he's in eighth grade this year, and he's like, listen, my sister, my whole family's in cannabis. His friends probably think he is the coolest.
It's all fun and games until you get a note home because he's told the teacher, maybe you need some CBD.
That's pretty good. Yeah, he's probably like, I got the coolest family ever. That's now, and then the way the laws work, right? He can't even come in. Can he even come into the store? I don't know how. Yeah, he can't come in and like see mom and dad or visit anybody because you can't let him in, right? That's pretty
No,
wild.
grand opening, he was a little sour given the fact that the whole family could
Yeah.
be there and cut a ribbon. And he's one of the bricks. There would not be six without him. It'd only be five, and that doesn't sound as good. And so, yeah, he got many of us for pizza, V-Bucks, and all the other things that 13-year-old young men are into.
Well, I got you. Wow. Okay. Very, very cool. So, and then, all right. So, an overachiever, kicked ass in high school, went to college, athletics in college, student government, all kinds of stuff, right? How about relationships? Have you had partners, married, kids, single, a nun? What's going on? Give us the Payton story there.
Great questions. Woefully single at this point in time.
Okay.
Came to that realization in the process of standing up Six Bricks. Have been in relationships prior to that. I mean, high school, college, right? Just kind of figuring out, like any person would when you're
Yeah.
early into relationships, what you like, what you don't like, so on and so forth.
Mm.
But over the course of the journey of standing up Six Bricks, it just came abundantly clear that having a partner wasn't fair to them, just given the imbalance of what can be the licensure process here in the state of Massachusetts and not being able to commit to timeframes, right? The last thing you want to do is tell your partner, you don't know when your business is going to open. So life decisions like kids and other things aren't a timetable you're willing to commit to just yet. So no kids, no husband, woefully single. We'll keep it
Well,
that
now,
way.
yep, yeah, but now that you're on a cannabis, now this is a single store operation. So although you're in the office right now, I'm sure you do it all, and you're probably all over the place. So you're probably on the sales floor a lot. I'm guessing,
Mhm.
right?
Almost
And
certainly.
yeah, so everybody that comes in, they're like, yeah, what is that the owner? Yeah, I want to meet her. Yeah, I'm sure you get a lot of that.
Oh, yeah, most certainly. The amount of meetings, and I'm using air quotes, that I have with different account executives, vendors who would like to show up to take me to a nice lunch. It's interesting, to say the least.
I
But
mean, hey, some free lunches, free dinners, free happy hours. I mean, hey, sometimes take advantage.
Uh, yeah, maybe I'll revisit that strategy in Q1 of 2023. But it is that awkwardness of having someone ask you for what they think would be a romantic dinner, not acknowledging that your father in the meeting, excuse me, that your father's in the meeting. And so it's just the awkward dynamic of it's hard to date at work when your dad's here too.
What's your dad do? Does he kind of like start moving around in the chair? Does he kind of like get uncomfortable? Oh, how's he respond to that?
I mean, his classic response is, we're here to talk business, not dating my daughter. And then
Gotcha.
there's this dead silence that falls into the room afterwards. That quickly ends that. I mean, I think he's made a lot of young men uncomfortable as a result.
He makes me uncomfortable just by looking at his photo. He looks like a big guy. I'm uncomfortable just looking at the website. I'm like, okay, I don't want to mess with him because he looks like he might get pissed.
I mean, I think you have your classic protective dad who wants to see his daughter be successful and taken seriously, hence the unisex name, which is something that, at first when you're younger, you want a more feminine name like Sarah, for example. And then you realize that people can't really figure out your gender to start. I have more name tags that say Mr. Payton hanging in my office than anything else. So, job well done, Fred. Job well done.
Was that his deal? Was that your mom and him deciding that whole name thing with all the kids together? Where'd that come?
Yeah, that was
decided
really my dad's doing. So
I
he
see.
had a sister with a very feminine name, her name being Yali, and he knew that there were times because she chose a career path in military that it affected her. And so he didn't want me to have the same experience, nor my sisters. And so with us each having unisex name, it became a really unique opportunity. And I mean, obviously ignorance is bliss when you're young and it's your 13th birthday and, the restaurant starts cheering happy birthday and says Mr. Payton and picks your classmate next to you versus you to drop the cake. You don't really enjoy it. But as I've gotten older, I can definitely have an appreciation for folks not necessarily knowing who's going to appear in the room and then seeing me in a dress and heels and them quickly etching out the mister. So it's less awkward for them and I. So yeah, I've grown into it and accepted it, but I can truly say he's probably one of the reasons I can call myself a visionary to a certain extent because you can really see things before they happen, which is nice.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I mean, I did the same thing when I first saw your name from our buddy Tom, our friend Tom. I saw your name, Payton. I did the same thing. I was like, oh, let me check this guy out or whatever I said in my own mind, And then I read his email and I'm like, wait a minute, hold on. What? Oh, let me pull this up on LinkedIn. Let me look on LinkedIn here. Oh, okay. I mean, I did the same thing. I'm sure that happens all the time. Okay. Now, so talk to us about, you worked for Mass Mutual for like, 10 years or something? How long did you work there?
So it is a total of 10. I started as an intern the summer after graduating high school in their IT academy at the time. Okay. And so I was an intern for about 4 summers and then a full-time employee for 6 years.
Wow, how about that? Listen to that, everybody. Running track, student government, straight A's, worked her ass off in the summer for internship, get an internship early, make sure you make connections. I mean, these are all of the right things to do. Did you do anything bad? Did you take any wrong turns? I mean, was there anything good in there? Like, have you ever been arrested or anything cool? Like something fun? I mean, come on.
I'm trying to think. I mean, you said it yourself. You saw Fred's photo, and that was enough to make you be like, oh, I'm not going to tempt fate on that one, right? So growing up, no, I didn't get into too much trouble. I tried to keep it on the straight and narrow. I think probably the worst thing I did is I attempted to skip school once and then chickened out. But then I still got detention because I was in the hallway without a pass. So
detention, you got detention like one time. Seriously, man, you're doing all the right things here. So you're working you could do the internship and then of course they offer you the job, right? And then you're there for 6 years. Where does the transition us into cannabis? How does cannabis start to play into it? And of course, I'm curious, was your family cannabis? Was your mom and dad cannabis? Did you smoke early on in high school? Just walk me through the whole thing. Yeah, go, not necessarily the store yet, but where does the store you opened yet, but where does cannabis come in? Go for it.
Yeah, so in high school, being the overachiever, I definitely knew folks who consumed cannabis, but wasn't necessarily comfortable doing it myself because I knew the consequences, right? And I think I was very practical at that point in time of just risk and reward, right? The risk was too high and there wasn't enough reward for me to try it when I was younger. But I was friends with most diverse groups of folks. So I knew the kids that were smoking. I also knew the kids who were selling it. And I saw the harsh reality of dropping a dime bag in the hallway and in-house suspension, followed by, police pickup or a parent pickup at the end of the day. And seeing what that looked like for me was my first introduction into cannabis. And then, of course, you meet the cool kids and they smell like it and they start having conversations. But it really wasn't until after graduating college, I was interning with the Springfield City Council, because you kind of go through this weird transition after being a college athlete where it's such a part of your identity for whichever sport you're playing, that once that's gone, you're looking for something else. So no longer being a track athlete, I found myself looking to occupy that time, and a regular workout wasn't cutting it. So I started interning with the Springfield City Council, and it was right around the time the voters voted to legalize, and I became really interested in cannabis. Why would the state of Massachusetts make it legal? And knowing some people who smoked it, I started kind of reviving those high school relationships to say, hey, I know I was a little judgy in high school, but can you tell me why you smoke so much? Like, what's in it for you? Why are you doing it? It's going to be legal. What does that look like? And so I would say early on in high school, I definitely had blinders on because I just knew it could get you in trouble. And that was the last thing I wanted. And once it was legal, it really piqued my curiosity, because for so long I was told it was bad. I mean, mom and dad did not smoke cannabis. There was no smoking or drinking in the household. So, I mean, I thought Sprite.
No drinking. So no drink. They didn't even no wine for dinner. None of that with your mom and dad.
Nope.
Well, I forgot
smoking,
to ask you.
no.
Okay, were they super religious, like pretty conservative, like Catholic or anything? Like, is there any religion in there, church in there?
I mean, I went to Catholic school when I was in elementary school, and we definitely did have a period of time where going to church on Sunday was a regular cadence. I would say that kind of broke up after going to college, just because I wasn't in the home as much.
Okay.
Um,
But no
but
drinking. Pretty
no.
conservative household there with the drugs and alcohol for sure.
Yeah, and it was really just around what I think at the time was my father's understanding of wanting a clear heart, head, and mind, right? And so as I thought about that, acknowledging certain substances could alter it, I didn't necessarily criminalize people who participated. I just knew it wasn't something that I was comfortable doing.
Okay, and the city council thing really is where so you telling me now, this is the perfect time to finally confess about something if you want to, for in high school or college. I mean, I know Fred's going to listen, your mom's going to listen, but right now, if you want to tell us about the time in college where you did some partaking of something. I mean, go ahead, Payton, you can tell us. It's all right.
Was I ever in a room where it was consumed? Yes. Did I do it? No. I mean, I was scaredy cat. I was like, there's no way I'm gonna be able to do this and no one find out about it. I was also on the track team, right? So in my mind, I associated cannabis with messing up lungs. And I was like, well, I know how it feels after a 400 now. I don't want it to feel any worse. So that was my deterrent.
Now, how about you had some beers, some wine? I mean, come on now, in college.
Oh yeah, in college, I would definitely say, I mean, because I was so involved with different community organizations, I mean, Jesuits do like their wine. So I was going to dinners with the president of the college and they're asking, would you like a pour? So I would say college definitely allowed me more of a sandbox to explore those things.
You mentioned, but I want to we'll come back to the city council thing, but you mentioned being able to hang out with diverse groups in high school. And I think that's a key thing there. I always tell people the same thing. Like I could go, and my story was, I'd be like, look, I could sit at any table, any lunchroom table, especially like in junior high and early high school before you could leave campus. We had like the thug group. We called them the thug groups, like the hardcore kids that lived on the bad side of town, which I actually lived on because my mom got divorced. But I could hang out with the preppy kids too, because my dad bought me clothes that made it look like I had money, but I actually didn't. So I could kind of fake it out. And I'd hang out with preppy kids. I'd go over here, go over here, go over here. Didn't matter, what group. I could pretty much hang out with any group, and I enjoyed being able to do that because I had friends in all areas, right? So if something was going down, I was protected.
Yeah.
Were you like that? Was it like that for you? You could kind of just hang out with any group?
Oh, most certainly. I think also too, a lot of it just came to what I was interested in, and that brought the diversity of friends, right? So I wasn't your cookie cutter varsity athlete who was all about sports. I was interested in band, but I was also interested in student government, and I was interested in debate, but I was also interested in art. And so a lot of my interests then fueled the community that I built, where to your point, right, I could sit at any lunch table comfortably because I hadn't boxed myself into the singular identity. But honestly, it also early on in my life made it clear to me how the importance of being able to talk to different people from different backgrounds and just the beauty in that diversity. And so for me, I love being at a table where I know the least because I get to learn the most. And so, yeah, I learned that in high school, just casually allowing my interests to then introduce me to the friends that I would make.
I know the listeners of this episode are thinking, "Oh, this is just kind of a fun little casual topic we're bringing up here," but really, it's important, and it shapes your ability for communication and people skills as you get older, and you're having meetings with different personalities and different cultures and different styles, and you learn how to adapt and move and shift in certain situations where you can win people over that you're trying to get something done, right, or win a group over. It's just so important. I really encourage younger people listening to this particular episode to stretch your mind, hang out, try to hang out with groups you don't hang out with every day. Come on, you could do it.
Oh, most certainly, most certainly. I joke with folks. I say some of my best friends are folks that look the complete opposite of me. I mean, the reality of it is at our core, we're all human beings. And so,
Right.
yes, you see a
Yeah.
young Black woman, but would you know that one of the closest people to me is a Jesuit and the former president of Holy Cross? Probably not, right? Until you have the conversation. So yeah, can't complain
Love it.
there.
Love it. The fact that, yeah, that we're all human. At the end of the day, food, water, shelter, love, faith of some kind, probably. I mean, if you got those, we're all looking for the basic 4 or 5 things, right? There's basic 4 or 5 things: food, water, shelter, love, health, maybe faith. Like, we're all looking for the same. It don't matter who you are, what race you are, we're all looking for the basic 4 or 5 elements of life, is the way I like to think about it. Okay, so let's go back to the city council thing. All right, so you're doing this thing as city council. You see this coming. It's obvious that it's going to pass. Everybody knows it's going to be legal. Now, your parents weren't entrepreneurs, so where'd the whole how'd this develop in your mind? You're like, wait a minute, okay, I'm interested in this. Then what? Are you thinking, I just want to be involved in getting it passed? Or are you immediately thinking, I want to be involved in getting it passed and I want to open a store?
Yeah, so I would say there was two things kind of playing in the back of my mind. The first was acknowledging that my grandfather had actually been an entrepreneur, and prior to
Okay.
his death,
Okay.
he was a very involved grandparent. He owned a storefront in Austin, in New York, and I would hear stories about his
Cool.
experience in opening a store. And so that always stuck with me, just the fact
Okay.
that you had
Cool.
this Black man in a primarily white community being able to open a store, and he would tell
Cool.
me stories about the different things he experienced. And I mean, this was a man who literally left South Carolina running away from his family because they wanted to continue to live on the same plantation that our ancestors were once enslaved on. So he and I always had a special relationship just because I respected what he did. I mean, running away from home without a plan per se takes some real courage and
Right.
boldness to it. And so that was always in the back of my mind, just how did he have the strength to do what he did? And considering when he died, we didn't have time to kind of get more into that due to my age and the timing of his passing. At the same time, my role with Mass Mutual had me exposed to a lot of startup companies. So I'd done a lot of work in research and development, meeting different founders of companies, hearing them pitch and talk about their ideas. And what was most interesting to me there is these were folks who were honest that they were dirt broke, eating ramen multiple times a night. But the minute you asked them to do a pitch, I mean, the energy and the passion they possessed, it was like they just had, a 5-course meal. And so there was something intriguing about being in the space where people were so happy despite not knowing where their next meal was coming from or if they could make payroll in a week. That was very intriguing to me. And so the two kind of collided, right? This idea that my grandfather had the strength to do something that in theory, maybe wouldn't have happened if it wasn't him. And at the same time, meeting all these entrepreneurs that were beyond passionate about their ideas on a recurring basis. And me just kind of thinking about my life and showing up to work every day at Mass Mutual was okay. But what else did I want out of life? And what risk was I willing to take? Because as you pointed out, right, I really hadn't been a risk taker up until that point in my life of, trying something that could get me in some trouble or trying something I could honestly fail at. I mean, if you look at my life up until that point, it was pretty safe, don't get into trouble, don't drink, don't smoke, have wine on occasion with the Jesuits because then mom and dad will accept it. But don't do anything too crazy.
Right.
And so, yeah, I guess I just wanted to take a risk and see what would happen.
Did you think I want to do a retail store or I just want to do something in cannabis? How did that formulate?
So honestly speaking, a lot of it was dictated by the city of Springfield. They were clear they were going to have a request for proposals, but it was really only going to be for retail license. And I knew I didn't want to be in cannabis just to be in cannabis. I wanted to be in cannabis in my hometown because I wanted the folks in the city of Springfield to have a locally owned and operated dispensary option, but I also wanted it to reflect the community that we lived in, acknowledging the checkered history of cannabis. And so for me, it was understanding I want to own a retail, but here are my provisions around why. I want to own it in the city of Springfield because I want those who live here to have an authentic option. And I also want something that's actually going to talk about the science and the benefits of the plant, not just the profit margins. And so once I started piecing together these concepts of, okay, I want to retail, it then parlayed itself into really understanding what it needed to look and feel like from a branding perspective. And so people, plant, and purpose were the three things that I kept saying, right? I wanted something that felt authentic to the people around me. I wanted to focus on the wellness aspects of the plant. And I wanted to have a purpose that wasn't just driven by dollars and cents. And so that then birthed what is now Six Bricks.
You're talking like you're a long-term retail / wholesaler, but you're not.
Oh no.
You sound like you are. You sound like you're this like you've been in branding and retail and wholesale. The way you just did that speech right there, you would just assume to look on your profile and be like, oh yeah, she's probably been in wholesale and retail her whole life. Wait a minute, hold on. Mass Mutual for 10 years. What? Hold on. How'd she
Yeah, no, I think it's most interesting. Recently, the articles being written, they always like to include that I'm 29. It's like, okay, we get it, but
that too. We forgot to mention the fact that you're only 29. You sound like you're like 49, like you're super experienced.
This is the kid figuring it out.
You're figuring all this out, and then are they like, okay, we're going to take proposals or whatever they call it for a certain number of licenses? Is that how it was going to work?
So honestly speaking, ignorance is bliss because I didn't know what the process was going to look like. I honestly, in my heart of hearts, thought I'm going to put together a really good application. I'm going to submit it when they make this request for proposals, and I'll get a license because nobody told me otherwise. The reality was the city said we're going to have a request for proposals, and 27 groups applied, Six Bricks being one. And then they said, oh, wait, we only want 4. And that's when my heart sank, right? Because at that point, I had spent some money out of my 401k Okay. Sorry, mom and dad. And I just assumed I was going to get it, and then I could figure out the investors and so on and so forth. But the city
Then
of
I can figure it
Springfield,
out. I'll get in the door and then I'll figure it out.
yeah. I mean, that's small details to figure out later, but the reality was I didn't know the city was only going to pick four. So the money at that point was already spent. I needed to do the land surveys and figure all these other aspects out to make a full proposal to the city. And I didn't know how to make a proposal. So I'm trying to find the right lawyer, the right accountants. At that point, I just got my parents on board to the fact that their once lawyer who they, thought was going to have a groundbreaking case is now all of a sudden going to be a legal drug dealer. So it's kind of a whirlwind of different things happening, right? I got I have my great aunt calling me at Christmas asking me why I'm not going to law school and since when did I smoke cannabis, and it's like, well, I'm still not smoking it, I'm just trying to sell it, right? So it was a little chaotic, but we got through it. And ultimately what happened in July of 2019, after accepting all these proposals, the city of Springfield went through and ranked them all, and we ranked third. So we got an automatic bid to negotiate a host community agreement. But it should be noted, we were ranked third after two multi-state operators. So in my mind, it was an unofficial first place, keeping in line with most of my career.
I will just tell you, if I had been now, before I started recruiting from Riderflex, I was a lifelong retail / wholesaler executive, right? I spent my whole life doing it, branding, all of it. If I had been on the board or whatever, the group that decided who got the licenses, and I was looking at your profile, I'd be like, let me get this straight. She's got no retail experience, no wholesale experience. She really has no cannabis experience. She doesn't even smoke cannabis. She's only 28 years old. No. But the answer is no. I would have just said no.
I like the honesty. I mean, and the reality is this is 2019. So I was 26, which I don't think helped matters, because most people were asking me, what business experience do you have? And I just kept pointing to Mass Mutual.
No entrepreneurial experience. Never started. I mean, there's nothing on your profile that it's so good. That is such a great story. It must have been a hell of a proposal. I mean, seriously, damn, a great job. Congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, one of the things I will say I think distinguished our proposal was the reality that I didn't want anybody speaking for me. So many of the groups sent their lawyers, and I was very clear that if I was going to do this, I wanted to speak for myself because I knew I couldn't compete with having millions in the bank or cannabis experience, but I wanted to be as authentic as possible. So if you look back at many of the recordings, because they were all recorded, it was a very public process. You would see a lawyer go up and kind of read through the multi-state operator of the XYZ group that is going to come to the city of Springfield, create this many jobs, so on and so forth. Then they'd sit down and then I go up. And I mean, let's be honest, I studied political science, so I knew how to stack things in my favor as it related to some of the greater politicians in American history. So I knew to get community support early on. I knew to engage community councils as I thought about it. So my presentation, you saw Springfield residents flood the gallery. You saw me give my presentation and my sister initiating a standing ovation. And then you saw me kind of mic drop and leave before somebody could ask questions, right? And so there was some strategy involved, but yeah, if you looked at my resume, there was nothing that indicated I would be able to successfully do this.
Was it kind of like the NFL draft? Like you got to go home and then wait for a week and you're all sitting around the living room waiting for a phone call? Like, how do you find out?
Oh, yeah, it was longer than that. So they had given the unofficial timeline of probably June timeframe that we would find out, and then they pushed it back to July. So I remember the day we found out because I was actually sleeping, just trying not to think about it, because the whole time you're waiting, you have to think about it. I'm 26. I just took money out of my 401k. I still have to tell my parents I did that in hopes that I can tell them at the same time I tell them that we got a host community agreement. But well, we'll figure it out. So I probably napped more then than I ever have in my life, just trying not to think about worst case scenario, which is you're out of this money and you don't have the proposal. So we didn't get a phone call or anything. It was announced on the news. The mayor had
Oh,
made a press release of the 4 groups that were selected, and Six Bricks was there as third. So I napped through most of the phone calls and congratulatory text until my mom kind of shook me up. And at that point, I thought somebody died because she never really wakes me up from naps. And so my response is everybody okay? Who died? And she said, no, you have a cannabis license, young lady. And at that point, the verbiage wasn't clear. I had the right to negotiate a host community agreement and then get a cannabis license. But needless to say, I then quickly said, okay, great. Because I got to tell you, I took money out of my 401k for this, but it's all so that was the day.
that's pretty good. Did you still have your job, by the way? Had you quit already? Okay, you were still working.
Oh yeah, no, I was too nervous for that. I was like, hey, listen, if this doesn't work out, we got to really double down here at Mass Mutual and figure out the vice president track in the next 3 years. So, yeah, did not give up my job at that point in time.
Yeah, good move. Yeah, totally. Wow. So that's another great tip slash thing we should share with the listeners. You did all of this homework and preparing for this proposal and the land survey, all the stuff you talked about. Like, this is all done while you have a full-time job, right? You know, which takes a lot of work. I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, honestly speaking, that's why you asked about relationships. I was like, oh yeah, I didn't have a social life for a little while. I mean, I was that friend who was notorious for sending a gift and sending my regrets at the same time. I mean, I was all in. I really wanted to figure out this industry and also how I could make a difference in it. But there were no real weekends that I had to hang out with friends or go to events. It was Mass Mutual Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and then Six Bricks from 7 to midnight. And then every weekend, it's just whatever I
Yeah.
couldn't get to
Wow.
during the week. So, I mean, it was a real grind. And of course, anybody who you're trying to initiate a relationship with, after the second or third cancellation, they're just kind of like, I'll pass, but thanks.
Yeah.
You're
Right.
cool. See you later.
Now you can in mass, can you, I don't know how the rules work. I'm ignorant to it. Can you be a grower and a retailer, or it's either or? How does that work?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's a few different license types. So in theory, you
Okay.
could apply for a micro business and do both. You can grow, manufacture, and produce, and then sell. I
Okay.
knew based on having conversations with folks that I only had the appetite to raise capital for retail because that was the
Okay.
other piece. Because I had interned with the Springfield City Council, I was meeting multi-state operators who at the time thought I was just this intern, right? But I was actually leveraging them for information. So in theory, if one were to go for a retail license, how much of an investment does that require? And they were like, well,
Mm.
corporate typically will set you up between 1.5 to 3 million, depending on your build out, so on and so forth. And once they, said 1.5 million as kind of the bare bones minimum point of entry, I was like, oh yeah, that's the license type I'll go for because everything else is just more expensive.
Okay, I see. All right, very good. Now, the building that you're in now, did you try to make a move to buy it? Did you just lease and do the build out? Do you mind me asking?
I don't mind you asking. So, in full transparency, this is not the original location we applied for. We applied for a location because at the time, I'll be honest, I was thinking very small relative to what a retail experience could look like. And so
Okay.
we were at a prior location that was in much more of an industrial neighborhood with tractor trailers and oil and so on and so forth. It wasn't until the pandemic hit and I really had time to just sit like many other folks did and think through some things that I came to the conclusion that we would need to do a change of address to have additional square footage to set ourselves up for long-term success. As in my mind, cannabis is going to really start to evolve into more of a cannabis experience with the addition of other license types. So once I knew I wanted to do the change of address, in my mind, I was just looking for a long-term lease. Again, thinking through the capital piece and not wanting to take on too much because also I'm still under 30. So it was figuring out like, and if this works well, we can keep going. But if it doesn't, that long-term commitment of buying a building doesn't seem like something you may be interested at this point, right? And this is the conversation you have with yourself as you figure out what makes most sense. So leases were comfortable because it was a short-term commitment, not a long-term one.
Gotcha. But you did have to pay for the build out. I'm assuming it wasn't. Yeah.
Oh, it was the perfect storm because I decided to start a business in an industry that's federally illegal. A pandemic hits, construction prices go through the roof, civil unrest after the murder of George Floyd. And if for those listening, I'm a Black woman. So, oh, yeah, it was
Wow.
a great time.
Wow. How did you raise the cash for the build out? If you don't, did you get investors, friends and family? How'd you get
Yeah.
that capital?
So we started with a round of friends and family to get the initial capital needed so that we can go from what was me using 401k cash through host community agreement special permit to actually apply with the Cannabis Control Commission here in the state of Massachusetts. So we started with friends and family that showed some really good commitment to what then became our investors so that we were able to progress through. But I mean, if you remember 2020 and 2021, the way I do, I mean, construction prices went through the roof. So as quickly as we were raising capital, it was also at the same time that our build out continued to get more and more expensive. Our first quote was 800,000 for build out. The second quote was 1.1. At that point, my family and I said, all right, pull the trigger. So we're literally buying sheetrock and lumber and stationing it at the location, right? Like we weren't even ready for it. It was just, if it gets any more expensive, this is not going to be good. The last quote we got from our GC was our build out, had we waited any longer, probably would have ran us 1.7. And that's just because, you know, supply chain across the board. It wasn't just the construction, it was laptops were hard to come by. And I mean, you remember it just as well as I did. Everything was kind of going through the roof and harder to secure. So it was a chaotic time.
Yeah, 1.7 is high for a build out, but like there's two things I kind of forgot about that you just reminded me of. Number one, the cost of the supplies was outrageous then, and it was your first store. So the whole initial investment in POS and all these other things that hadn't been set up yet in software or whatever. Like you were, I mean, because it was your first location, which is always more expensive than your second location, won't be nearly as expensive when you get ready to open up your second store.
Yeah, no, most certainly. But I think also too, one of the hard parts was getting people to buy in. I mean, you have someone here who's many of the investors I was talking to at the time had kids my age. And I'm trying to get them to buy into this idea and this concept. And to your point, right, they're looking at their resume and they're hearing me talk and it's not adding up, right? Like, so no, really, do you have a marketing background? Did you study it in college? I'm like, no, I studied political science. I just need you to understand what I'm trying to do here in my hometown. And so it was a lot of different things that were happening. But I can say this, having a company, like I mentioned with the name Six Bricks, where you have mom and dad who are cheering you on the whole time, and you have your sisters who are watching you do this, as well as your brother looking into you. I mean, they just kept showing up saying, you're going to figure it out. You're going to figure it out. So it definitely keeps you going. But I mean, when I say perfect storm, I joke next time I start a business, I'm just scared what's going to happen. Because I mean, pandemic, construction, so on and so forth, you name it, we experienced it.
Family and business. I've worked for a few companies where family members were involved. Family in the building or a family member over here or over there or whatever. And on the org chart, this family member kind of reports up to this non-family member person, but the family, it can get, it's an interesting dance, with family. How's it been so far?
Yeah, I would say early on, my family and I were very clear when we sat down of how this needed to function in order for us all to be successful. And the biggest thing was writing it down. I mean, it's a
Yes.
different dynamic when mom and dad, who you look up to, I mean, they changed your diapers for God's sake. Now you're calling by their first names. Hey, Fred and Dawn, how's it going today? Right. And you're creating this church and state of home life and work life. And, you know, your dad's sitting in meetings where men are hitting on you and he has to keep it as professional as possible. So there were definitely growing pains. But I think what helped us is one, writing it all down, but then two, also providing spaces where we could still keep that family intact, and having a 13-year-old helps, right? So holidays, no talk of business. Sunday dinners, no talk of business. And then what we
Good.
call the switch, right? Which is to say, what version of Peyton am I getting? Am I getting my daughter? Am I getting my sister? Or am I getting the CEO who's going to hold me accountable? But also putting time frames around that, leaving work at work, right? So yes, I sat you down and told you what you can improve on at the office, and now when we go home, I'm asking you to buy me pizza because you're my mom or you're my dad.
Have you
So
actually had to, like, I don't want to use the word correct, but have you had to, I'm sure you've had moments where like, mom, no, you need to do it like this. I'm sure you've had that.
oh yeah. I mean, but they've also had moments where they're like, hey, no, you gotta do it like this. What are you doing? Like, calm down, right? And so what I can appreciate it is this two-way collaboration of they
Uh,
want what's best for me, I want what's best for them. But yeah, I'd be lying to you if I sat here and said every day it's rainbows and butterflies. No,
oh
there have
no,
been
this,
certain
no,
days where
no.
I'm like, do you want to work here? Because if not, this might not be the right environment for you, right? And so you have that conversation, and then 2 days later, you know, you're putting things in their stocking at Christmas. Right? So
Isn't, you know what?
it's a different.
I'm so glad you said that. I'm so glad you didn't fake it out. You know, anybody that comes on the Riderflex podcast and tries to tell me that it's always rosy when family members work in the business, no, it ain't. No, it
No,
ain't.
not at all. Especially when your mom controls your calendar and she's like, so what's this thing Friday night? I'm trying to block time with you, young lady. It's like, mom, if it's blocked out, it's blocked out. Please stop asking questions. Just let
Yeah,
me have
please.
this one.
Now, how about you and cannabis personally now? So, and your folks. I don't know if they'll let you answer that question, but now, like, is the whole family cannabis consumers, smoking, edibles, casually, daily? Like, where are you with cannabis now, personally? Let's start with you personally.
Yeah, so I would say me personally, I do consume. I do keep myself to only the weekends though, keeping in
Okay.
line with this kind of clear head and mind Monday through Friday. But
Okay.
I would honestly credit the pandemic to giving me more time to actually explore with a reasonable amount of safety in mind, if you will, right? Because what I found previously was I was always in settings with people, but not knowing exactly how I would feel or experiencing it. There was never this comfort of like, I can do this and all these people around won't pull out a phone, so on and so forth, right? So think about the times I went to high school and college, right? I still remember the Razor cell phones that you could pull out, right? Or the sidekicks. And then college, everybody had an iPhone. It was almost like a cult. And so it was just kind of like, well, at some point, if I'm going to be a lawyer, I could be in politics. And I see too many examples of politicians having photos leaked that are less than
Oh yeah.
flattering, right? So don't want to do that. But you had time because it was like, well, everything's canceled and stay home, and a pandemic hit. So you find yourself exploring things. So I would say at that point, I was a little bit more comfortable saying, all right, I will go try this edible and see what happens, right? And I think my first experience was I went to sleep. I like probably lost 12 hours of my life. I was just like two edibles and I'm gone, right?
Yep.
Uh,
Yep.
and then I knew I needed more education around it. And now I can say on the weekends that I'll casually consume. Mom and dad are mom and dad, right? So they still do
Yeah.
not consume, but they're supportive. And it's so funny because they've sat through the responsible vendor training and many other things. And the irony of it is they can talk to you about terpenes and cannabinoids and many other concepts. They just don't know how they would personally experiencing it, right? So it's
Interesting.
been an interesting dynamic of us all kind of figuring out our own relationship with cannabis. But one thing I will acknowledge is as a family, we all do have the belief that it can be a part of an individual's wellness routine, which has been for me at least really beautiful to see because I acknowledge that my parents didn't have to accept it the way they did. They didn't have to support it or embrace it, but they willfully chose to do so. And so I respect their decisions not to consume, but also appreciate them correcting my orders when I try to purchase too many products with limonene in it, which is a terpene. And they say, actually, I think you need to diversify this piece. Lets me know I have the right team members around.
Can you smoke at their house? Can you go on the back porch at their house and smoke?
No, that's when you take that Thanksgiving walk with your cousins, right? And plus, considering how many cameras are at the house, I wouldn't even want the evidence, right? So no consuming at
Oh,
mom and dad's.
did you know I'm 55 years old and still to this day, when I go to my mom's in Oklahoma, me and my cousins or whoever else is around, the rest of us 40 and 50 year olds, keep in mind my mom's almost 80, still, we will not drink in front of her. Like we'll be like, hey, we're gonna go out back and check the garden and see, and then we'll go get a cup and we'll go or we'll go out to my car or we'll go for a drive or whatever, or it's still like weird. And my wife's always like, what are you doing? She's like, you're 55. By the way, I'm a grandpa. She's like, you're a grandpa. You're still hiding alcohol from your mom. Like, that's weird. I'm like, I know. It's weird. I don't know. Anyway.
Hey, you know what? All that tells me is I will be you in a few years, my friend, and probably still in the car on the way. I
I
mean, it's
still
the
do it.
reality, though. I mean, I have friends who drink in front of their parents, consume cannabis in front of their parents. I just never think I'll get there. But it's
Yeah.
also acknowledging that, I mean, they weren't born last night. They know it happens,
Right.
but it's just not something that needs to happen to them. So, air high five for all those that hide it from their parents.
Yeah, totally. Okay, very good. So we're almost out of time. Two last questions here. I could talk to you for another hour, but
I appreciate
what's
that.
the do you want to build a national retail brand? What's the plan? What's the plan long term?
Great question. Honestly, when I started, that was the plan, right? I wanted to become a multi-state operator, having stores everywhere, so on and so forth. And the process of this journey, though, it became clear to me that what I was doing meant a lot to the community. And that's the whole reason I got started. And I think it's easy to get lost in the hype of being able to make a lot of money in industry. But for me right now, the focus is just kind of carving out my slice of the pie and really focusing on economic growth here in the city of Springfield. So my hope long term is that here at 1860 Main Street, where we currently have a retail, that if we look up a year, 2 or 3 down the line, we have delivery, social consumption, and other types of cannabis licensures that allow me to hire more people from the city of Springfield and do more good here in my community because it'll always be home.
By the way, for the listeners, the number sixbricks.com is the website. And you just gave the address. Last question. I asked this question a lot. Now you're young. I can't believe you're only 29 years old. Wow. You're not even 30 years old yet. Holy cow.
It's coming quick.
What if you had to define your core purpose in life, which you've kind of been doing, throughout the conversation, but if you had to put it in a sentence, maybe or two, what does that sound like for you? Payton's core purpose.
So I would borrow a saying from Soledad O'Brien, who I had the privilege of seeing speak while in college. And for me, it's really being a voice for the voiceless. I acknowledge because of my education and the opportunities that have presented themselves to me over time, that I can be a voice for those in the city of Springfield that have a cannabis conviction and can't get hired at a dispensary. I can be a voice for communities that had high arrest and conviction records and now are seeing multi-state operators benefit on the same streets that they were once arrested on. And so my purpose is providing a voice in this noisy industry to what needs to be corrected if we're really going to head towards a federal legalization and not further the economic divide that the same plant is now legally providing a means for.
Should we release everybody in prison right now for a non-violent marijuana conviction?
Most certainly. We should have done it a long time ago.
I totally agree. Crazy that there's people in the state of Colorado. There are men and women in Colorado prisons, the first state to legalize it, sitting there in prison right now for non-violent marijuana charges. Meanwhile, I can go right down here and buy it at the dispensary right now. I mean, that is, I don't even know the word to describe it. I get so wound up about that. I get really passionate about it. I'm like, that is you got to be kidding me. I mean, this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Most certainly. I mean, the reality of what you're speaking to is I went to high school with people who went to jail over cannabis, and that altered the trajectory of their life. And
Yes.
I'm now in a position where I'm financially benefiting from it. The difference is I'm aware of that, right? And so you have these tone deaf multi-state operators that come in and dress their stores up like Apple stores, and they talk about, this new industry. Cannabis is not new. The experience you're providing is, right? But cannabis has been a part of the American history longer than you and I have both been alive.
Yeah.
Right. And so to me, it's making it clear that, multi-state operators, you're doing well now, but what are you doing in the communities that were brutalized, heavily policed when it wasn't legal? And if the answer is nothing, then you're problematic for multiple reasons.
I have to add one more thing on that. I know we're going over on time. You probably have another meeting booked.
No worries.
Changing the trajectory, right? Like that part right there is, I mean, it could have happened to me. I mean, it could happen to me numerous times over my life. Even back when I was in college in the 80s. I mean, when I was in college, I smoked all the time with my friends. I mean, all the time. And I think about my life and so many times I could have been arrested. And what if I'd have been sent to jail for 2 years? And then what if when I was in jail, then I joined a gang and then I had to hurt somebody to protect myself. And then I did this and then I did that. And then all of a sudden, I mean, anything could have happened, right? Anything could have happened. We should, in my opinion, first of all, we should release everybody in prison right now for a non-violent marijuana conviction. Secondly, anybody walking around with a felony on their record for marijuana should be expunged. Like that's it. It's super simple. This is a no-brainer. I'm starting to get wound up as I talk about it. Anyway.
No, I mean, I appreciate the passion because the reality is enough people don't get wound up about it, right? It's kind of that thing you kind of say, oh, yes, we're aware, but what are you doing to correct it?
What are you doing?
Yeah. If you have millions in the bank and you're a multi-state operator, do better.
Do better. Yep. Couldn't agree. Payton, congratulations. Wonderful story. Appreciate you being on the Riderflex podcast and sharing. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate the time.